Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this Red video we're going to be discussing Vega 10, Vega 20, Navi, and Zen Plus, as well as 7nm, and more specifically some of the specifications of those parts and just the pure computing insanity which lies within. Now, just to get everyone up to the same page, as you're probably aware, AMD currently have Polaris out, which is the RX 460, 470, and finally 480. But most folks are looking forward to the big parts, the parts which are going to just, compete with either the Titans or the GTX 1080 or what have you. And there have been some leaks and there have been some information released. For example, AMD themselves have confirmed it's going to have high bandwidth memory too, and some leaks from LinkedIn have pegged the card with 64 compute units. But aside from that, there's been precious little apart from a very tentative release date of the first half of 2017. But some information from videocards.com, more specifically a source they have access to. This source, by the way, has a pretty good history. They confirmed the mobile Polaris specs before the cards were released. So they have a history of being pretty accurate and not just pulling things out of their ass, which is nice. So according to them, the card is going to be coming out in 2017, but it's going to be the first quarter. I really hope that's true. And it will indeed still have 64 compute units with 24TF of 16-bit computing power. Now, Vega 10 is, of course, still going to be based upon 14nm GFX9 architecture. So that sounds definitely like it's a step up above Polaris. Now, there have been a few folks over at AMD, I covered this a while back, that did confirm that Polaris and Vega are two very different GPU architectures. Basically, it's not that necessarily they've completely redesigned everything, so, everything's completely and utterly unique, but it appears they're making some efficiency and performance improvements to Vega. What those are, the deep specifics, I don't know. So it's still going to be based upon 14nm, and it's going to come with 16GB of high bandwidth memory too, no surprises there, with a bandwidth of 512GB per second. Once again, no surprises there. But this is with up to 24TF of 16-bit computing power. That's a surprise. That's absolutely crazy. Now, the power consumption is around 225 watts, but the dual Vega 10 is going to be released in 2017 second quarter, and its power consumption is going to be 300 watts. Just the way this is written, I'm presuming that the 24TF is going to be for the dual part. It sounds like it anyway. Now, Vega 20 is something that's not really been talked about. In fact, it's been pretty mysterious, and I don't think I've heard anything about it until now. So Vega 20 is naturally still Vega, but presumably it's going to be a super enhanced edition. It's going to be 7nm, so for those of you who are keeping count, that's from 14 to 7, so they're basically shrinking down the process. Still going to be GFX 9. I don't know if there's going to be any architectural changes, but the primary difference is that the power consumption is going to be reduced to just 150 watts. Mostly, I'm assuming, a function of 7nm. We'll get to that. And feature 32GB of high bandwidth memory too, with 1TB per second of memory bandwidth. And it also will have 64 compute units. Now, some folks are immediately going to say, well, why has it still got 64 CUs, dude? I mean, what gives? Well, there's a few arguments that we could use for this. The first is that they're going to be higher clock speeds, which is definitely a potential option. We know that Polaris has been, I wouldn't say disappointing, but it's not really set worlds alight when it comes to clock speeds. You might get, I think the default clock, if memory serves, is 1266, and it can boost up to, or you can overclock it more accurately, to around the 1300, 1350, maybe a little bit more if you are really fortunate or have a third party, or you've installed water cooling, or you live in the Antarctica. But compared to what you can get out of like the GTX 1070, the 1080, or any of the other Pascal parts, it's not that great. So it's possible one of the things that AMD are doing with Vega is making it more robust for higher clock speeds, which of course in turn mean that those shaders are going to put out more performance. But there's also other changes that AMD could be making behind the scenes, or rather internally. They could be doing further improvements to the pipeline to make it more efficient. For example, it could be culling geometry or other such crap that isn't being used early on in the process. This is something they've done with Polaris. They could be doing further efficiency improvements. That sounds better, doesn't it? To the memory bandwidth and memory and the way it shuffles data around the card. It's possible that they're also making changes to the way shaders are working, such incorporated into the GPU. We don't really know. For example, it could even be things such as caching and other bits and bobs. Now, what about Navi? So Vega 11 and Navi 10 and 11 will be slowly appearing in store shelves next year. From what they are saying, or what this source is saying, Vega 11 is going to be a direct like-for-like replacement with Polaris 10. So essentially it's going to be like, whoop, and replaced. So Vega 11 is going to be the same as Vega 10, it's just going to basically be 14nm, and presumably there's going to be like GDDR5 variants, GDDR5X possibly, and basically for folks who already have an RX 480, I'm going to just assume it's going to be the equivalent of an RX 580 and 570 and possibly a 590 or whatever the hell their naming conventions are going to be. And I presume that those clock speeds are going to be a little bit higher. Performance per shader is going to be, or rather the IPC is going to be improved a little bit, and general architecture improvements. Now, Navi 11 and Navi 10 are supposedly going to be hitting in 2019. So for those who have seen the roadmap, and we all know what that roadmap is, that means that it's going to be pushed back a little bit. Now, the really insane thing as well I forgot to mention about Vega 20 is it's also going to be supporting PCIe 4. I have talked about PCIe 4 a few times now. It's basically the logical successor to PCIe 3. So you can imagine pretty much what the changes are. Improved memory bandwidth and all of the other bits and pieces, which basically means that newer graphics cards are going to be able to communicate faster with the CPU. Now, AMD are expecting to have 7nm Zen Plus on shelves by 2020 or before. So of course, Zen is currently being scheduled for late this year / early next year, with an abundant supply by, let's say, first quarter, second quarter for desktops, and that will include the Summit Ridge lineup, which of course is the one that most folks are interested in if you're going for gaming PCs. Now, what we don't understand is that Zen Plus is going to be the logical successor to Zen, and presumably we're going to see some improvements on the IPC, maybe some improvements on clock speed. We don't know if there's going to be new, let's say, motherboards or platform for Zen Plus. I presume it probably might be, rather than AM4, but I don't know that. However, all of those, as I've just said, is going to be on 7nm. Now, as you can probably imagine, the main difference between 7nm and 14nm is that it's quite literally half the size. That means you can deliver double the amounts of density. To put it into another way, that means that you've got more space, because each item takes up less space, to squeeze into the same size piece of silicon. Physical size piece of silicon. So let's say, and I'm just throwing out an example, if you have a chip that's like 2 inches by 2 inches, you can fit in more transistors, more components, more memory, more cache, more whatever the hell you're trying to put in that space, compared to one that is 2 by 2 but is 14 or 28nm. I think that's pretty obvious. So that means that you've got performance increases, because obviously you can squeeze more stuff in, but it also requires less energy to do this, and you've also got other benefits as well, such as lower power consumption. That's really cool. And from what has been revealed, Global Foundries are going to be doing what's known as risk production in 2018. That's basically pretty much what it says on the tin. It's going to be Global Foundries testing out the creation of silicon, figuring out what they can do, where the process is going wrong, and basically figuring out what they need to do to go to full-scale production and to eventually start to produce proper wafers so they can sell it, well, you know, to people, which would be kind of handy. So that is going to happen by 2020, so the risk production is going to be for 2018. Now, for my mind, this is really important because AMD and, of course, Global Foundries are going to be jointly working on this quite tightly, and it's going to be absolutely fantastic when the card is finally released, or when any of these pieces of technology is finally released. And remember, these companies are not thinking like, you know, 2 years ahead. They're often thinking 3 or 5 or even longer. And so Zen Plus is not going to be the end goal for them. They're eventually going to be thinking of even successive CPUs and CPU architectures. So what's my take on this? Well, honestly, it's kind of cool. I actually want AMD to release a high-end part. I think it's going to be good for the industry, as I've mentioned 1,000 times over before. So for my mind, the quicker it's out, the better. It's just great for us as customers. I would be surprised, honestly, if Vega 10 is only as competitive for the same price point. So let's say, for example, a $300 card is, or let's say a $400 card is as competitive as a $400 Pascal card, because it wouldn't make sense. I would be surprised if we don't see a generational leap, and therefore AMD are possibly going for like a card that's, well, Volta. Maybe they're shooting for Volta level of performance, or maybe Vega 10 will be like Pascal and a half, so it's not quite Volta. We don't know yet, of course. At the end of the day, all we can do is review it and test it out. But for now, hopefully you have enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.